Okay, thanks everybody. It is 1 o'clock on an absolutely beautiful day, so let's talk digital cartels for 30 minutes or so and then go back outside and enjoy the sun. All right, so a couple things here. We'll just start quick introduction. So I'm Todd Achilles. I teach public policy at Boise State, College of Idaho, and UC Berkeley. My whole focus is on competition, anti-monopoly, and tech policy. So this idea of kind of what's happening with our digital economy is just near and dear to me. And I've spent a lot of time researching it and looking at policy solutions. My background is I'm a farm kid from Oregon. I served a couple years in the Army, and then 20 plus years in the tech sector, doing a couple startups with one of them with this gentleman right here. I think the first one I did right out of grad school. We haven't seen each other in 20 plus years, and then had a good run at T-Mobile, Hewlett-Packard, running global operations. And then about 10 years ago, I quit my gig and decided it was time to return to public service, and that's when I started teaching public policy. And again, just trying to focus on those areas of intersection between corporate power and democracy, right? How do we balance those two? How do we balance free markets with just fundamental individual rights? And then 2 years ago, I got appointed to the legislature. I spent 2 years in the Idaho legislature, really enjoyed it. And then about 9 months ago, I resigned from the legislature to run for the US Senate as an independent against Jim Risch. So, and from a policy standpoint, these are the sorts of things that I think we need to do much better at a federal level than we're doing right now. So I'll go through, I'll talk about kind of what the problems are, and then we'll spend some time on some policy solutions. And then if we've got a little bit of time at the end, we can do a little mystery shopping. And we'll see what people come up with. All right, does that sound good? All right, let's do it. So one of the classes that I teach is on policy analysis, and I just hammer it with my students that if you don't have a clear problem statement, then you can't come up with a policy solution. And I think that the problem statement in terms of where we are right now in our digital economy is this. We've got this explosion of consumer data. Basically, everywhere we go, everything we do, we're leaving a trail of consumer data. And that data creates information asymmetry between consumers, between buyers and sellers, consumers and suppliers. And that information asymmetry is being used basically to kind of rig the system. And when you rig the system, when you engage in this kind of economic exploitation, you're undermining people's economic liberty. And I'll give some concrete examples of what's happening there. And I think you don't look any further than FDR in terms of what's really important here. Individual freedom, economic security. I mean, these are core fundamental values. And when our system of government isn't providing that, then things begin to fall apart. I think we're beginning to see that in terms of some of the tensions and the politics and everything that's going on. We're beginning to see too many people struggling. And it's a result of losing their economic security. And I think that's what we have to bring back. Okay, a couple quick definitions here as we kick this off. So an algorithm, super simple, right? Basically just you're solving for a math problem, putting some data in and getting an output on it. Machine learning, a little more complex. Consists of a series of algorithms, and you're using this to make predictions or make decisions without explicitly reprogramming what you're doing, right? So your system is learning and optimizing. And then automated decision systems, which we see more and more in civil society here. Now you're sort of stacking these things up. You're stacking algorithms on top of machine learning, and you're making decisions on credit scores, on eligibility for a program with little or no human interaction. And then finally, what everybody's talking about, and this is a very, very tame definition of artificial intelligence, but this idea that you can develop and refine machine learning so you begin to replicate, approximate cognitive tasks, right? It looks more and more like a human. I think we're still a long ways away from that, but we're moving pretty fast. So just a couple definitions, because we'll refer to this as we go through. All right, so let's start with the data. The amount of data being created now is just off the charts, right? And we had on the order of about 7 zettabytes in 2018, and we're creating just in the U.S. 2025 nearly 31 zettabytes. So and what that means when you look at it, it's growing at about a 24% compound annual growth rate. And it's just more and more of these transactions are creating a digital trail behind them. So e-commerce is now 16% of all retail sales. Obviously, a ton of data comes out of e-commerce transactions, not just what you put in your shopping cart, but what you don't put in your shopping cart, what you browse, what you linger on. All of these small movements or just second hesitations, all of that is data that's created around who you are. Loyalty cards, mobile apps create a ton of data. Mobile apps more than anything. And if you just take this number, this 31 zettabytes, divided by all Americans over 15 years old, that means on average, across Americans over 15, 300 gigabytes a day of data that we're all creating a day. I mean, the numbers are just staggering, and it's not going to slow down. And the key thing on this, just from a policy standpoint, I mean, there's effectively little or no consumer protections on this data. It's out there, it's accessible, people can use it, and it's creating whole new business models. And the first big business model is the data brokers. So you've got this emergence of what a lot of people refer to as pricing intermediaries. And data brokers are in this, so it's about a $400 billion industry in the US, about 2,000 data brokers. And there's, Experian, Equifax, there's this, a Venn diagram of overlap between kind of the credit scoring agencies and the data brokers, because there's a natural connection there. And what these data brokers are doing is basically just hoovering up all the data they can find. So collect it all, they'll buy it, but they do the hard work of correlating all of this data and getting it back to an individual standpoint. Now, there's some protections in terms of personally identifiable information, but there's so much data out there, it's pretty easy to take it and correlate it with this individual or that individual. And then all this data is feeding what we're seeing more and more of are these pricing algorithms. Now, the FCC's done a little bit of pushback on this, but not nearly enough. There was a big one, and I spent a lot of time in the wireless industry. Basically, the big three wireless operators got busted for about $200 million of fines for sharing all of the data that we create, where we travel, where we go, where we shop, where maybe that phone slows down for just a couple minutes, or you're at a location for 30 minutes. All of that gets shared. Yeah.
How much value did the companies make off the data that they illegally sold?
I don't know the number, but I think it's a whole lot more than 196 million.
Yeah. That's the critical point on that.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Good point.
Question?
Yeah, please.
When they're fined, are there any other repercussions, like you can't keep doing this?
I
just pay money and go away?
Yeah, I think in this one they did have to change some of their business practices, but a lot of the times it's just a slap on the wrist. Yeah, and it's in the T's and C's or the EULAs and the other agreements. So again, we get back to there's just not a lot of protections on data. And my favorite example, and some folks in here are old enough, you still can't share what VHS tape people rent. That's private information. But what we stream, everything else, it's wide open. So there's a lot of consumer protections that need to be updated here. Okay, so data brokers. Now the other big thing is, what's price? Right. So now we're beginning to just challenge this concept of price. In the good old days, price was cost of goods sold, and then the margin that the seller needed, and you'd set price based on that. But now you've got this growing information asymmetry. So price is not a function of the seller. Price is a function of the buyer and what you know about the buyer. So if we just take two simple demand curves here, we'll start with the green one. So this demand curve says, my optimal place is E2 is where the price of a good meets my demand. That's kind of my marginal benefit. That's where I get benefit from. And let's just say the green line is Boise. It's everybody collectively in Boise. And this is the price you'll see in a store. Now, if you're not shopping in a store, if you're shopping on a mobile app or online where there's no other interaction, and that store knows some things about you, that store can make some estimates about what your individual demand curve is and can change the pricing. And maybe, what the store will try and do is get you to buy a little bit more. So let's just say the orange line is your individual demand curve. Ideally, the store will try and get you to buy a little bit more and spend a little bit more, right? That's what drives the margin. But maybe you don't want to buy something, but it's like really important. You and your partner are sick as a dog, and you don't want to go out, you don't want to go to the Albertsons, so you're just going to buy some cold medicine online. But you really need that cold medicine. So you're not going to buy more, you just need to get some cold medicine now. And if you're going to do that online, maybe you made a post about how sick you are, or maybe the flu's going around. All of these things are demand signals that a retailer with enough data about you can make some estimates, and they can set the price up here. Charge you more for a good than what would be the price for everybody, all Boiseans in aggregate. And this is the sort of information asymmetry that's growing more and more. Yeah?
Is this an example in terms of e-commerce, or is that kind of playing on the changes we're seeing with like Walmart and their taking back?
Good question. This is more of an e-commerce, right? This is where it's just one individual, one e-commerce platform, where you don't have a posted price or anything like that. But we'll get to that Walmart example. That's a good one. So the other thing that's happening is, we're beginning to combine all of this data and these algorithms and this growth of pricing services. So there's a company called RealPage. I don't know, how many people have heard of RealPage? Yeah, they're really big in the rental housing market. And it's basically a pricing algorithm for hire. And so what RealPage does is works with property managers. Two of the big ones in the Treasure Valley are Greystar and Cortland, but there's lots of others. This is an example of one of the Greystar properties that's in my district, right off Whitewater Boulevard. And so what RealPage does is help these property managers charge more. And I'll jump to this one. And I actually introduced a bill in the Idaho legislature last year to ban this practice, but this is basically what happens. So Company X, we'll call this Greystar, they sign up with a service provider, RealPage. And so as part of that agreement, what Company X does is provide their rental rates and pricing and vacancy and how many units are open and all of that. And they'll feed that, all of that non-public commercial data, they'll give it to RealPage. So RealPage also signs up others. So this could be Cortland, this could be any number of other property managers. And what we've seen is somewhere on the order of 20% or so of apartments in the Treasure Valley are tied into RealPage, are being managed through RealPage. So RealPage takes all this data from all these different apartment managers, crunches it in their pricing algorithm, and comes back and says, hey, you can increase your one bedrooms by $100, your two bedrooms by $150, and oh, by the way, leave a couple of your units vacant. Don't rent them out. So keep demand tight, limit supply. And as a result of all of this, and then so RealPage makes those recommendations that go back out to the property managers. The property managers do that, and guess what happens? Rental rates go up. And so there's a massive asymmetry here between the renter in a building, and it's really hard to move buildings. It's not like you can, switch from this loaf of bread to that loaf of bread, right? So people are kind of stuck, and they don't have a lot of options, and now their rent continues to bump up using these pricing algorithms.
Is that like antitrust by proxy? I mean, aren't there already laws against price fixing, including with competitors on monopolistic?
So there are, but the old model of price fixing is everybody gets into a dark room, nobody knows they're there, and they exchange information, they agree on a price. They're not talking to each other. Exactly. And that's one of the holes in the antitrust laws, that this sort of remote price fixing or algorithmic price fixing, you look at it and it looks like anti-competitive behavior and should be illegal, but it's, by Idaho's antitrust laws, and we have some pretty good antitrust laws, it's not illegal. Yeah.
It seems to me that this is just very granular demand. If I want a product, the demand is high for me, then the price gets jacked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, given that I'm a loyal customer, I need that food again.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold that thought. Yeah. That's exactly what we're getting into. Now this is this algorithmic price fixing has been going on in the housing market all over the country. And RealPage has been sued by the feds, by states, by AGs. And both the two that I mentioned, both Graystar and Cortland, they were busted by the FTC, and they had to pay fines and sign a consent decree. But a lot of the others are doing the same thing. They just haven't been busted yet. But the key fact here is, and when I was running for election in ¡24, I've got a lot of apartment buildings in my district. And so I knocked on a lot of doors, and I had a lot of conversations about, man, the building manager just hit me for an extra $100 last year. I just got hit with another $100. My paycheck hasn't changed. If this happens again, I'm out. And when you hear that again and again in different buildings managed by different companies, you know something bad is happening in the market. When you aggregate the numbers, you see that in the Treasure Valley and up in Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene's got the same problem too. Rents have increased 3 times faster than inflation. And you can kind of see this on an annual basis here. And sorry if the number's a little small. But 2019, inflation was 2.3%. Rents only went up 1.1%. Okay, that's okay. That's sort of pre-COVID. 2020, rents went up 8%, inflation was 1.4. 21, inflation spiked to 7, rents went up 7. Okay, so there's some match there. But you see here in the out years, as the presence of RealPage got more and more substantial in the state, rents up 11.4, inflation 6.5. Rents up 18, inflation 3.4. Rents up 7.2, inflation 2.9. So you see rents just completely outpacing inflation. And that only happens in a rigged market. The other thing you see out of this is that a huge jump in the number of households in Idaho that are cost burdened, that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Yeah.
How do you feel about social policies like rent freezes and like their effectiveness to combat this sort of malicious circumventing of antitrust laws?
Yeah, it's a great question on rent freezes or rent controls. I mean, I generally don't like that because I think that changes the incentives in terms of people that are trying to do the right thing. I think what we need, though, is just to break the grip of these bad practices and return competition to the market. Right now, there's a little no competition because of what RealPage is doing. So you see rents increasing far faster than inflation. You see a big jump in the house burden. And then the other thing to really sort of manifest this is just what happens with evictions. So over that same period, when you begin to see rents outpace inflation, evictions begin to spike for just the reason that I heard as I was knocking on doors. I mean, we absolutely cannot allow these property managers to rip off renters. And here's a sense of the scale of this problem. So roughly 90,000 apartment units in the Treasure Valley. You take an average rate of what people pay per month. In aggregate in the Treasure Valley, it's about $1.4 billion that's spent on rent every year from 90,000 units. On the, make an estimate, even a conservative estimate, probably 30% of what people are paying for rent right now is inflated as a result of this price fixing. $400 million per year. is being ripped off, is being taken from renters' pockets by these property managers engaged in these illegal practices. That's $400 million. That's, that's a dinner out, right? That's going to the coffee shop. That's saving for a house. That's saving for your kid's college fund. Just go down the list, and these guys are hoovering up this amount of money out of Idaho's economy, and it's flat out wrong. And we should have no tolerance for this. So that's algorithmic price fixing. Another thing that we're seeing more and more is the surveillance pricing, which goes back to what you were starting to talk about. So we've got the same thing here, which is by knowing more about your background, I could charge you more. I can also pay you less if I'm an employer. So same thing here, that there's a demand curve, kind of a generic demand curve of what the individual values. And let's just say whatever. This is diapers. Let's just say this is diapers. So willing to pay 4 packs of diapers and for a price of 6. That's kind of the optimal point. If the price dropped down to like 5, maybe they'd buy 6 diapers. But what happens if it's Friday night, your spouse isn't feeling well, you're out of diapers, the baby's just not in a good place, and you need to get some diapers fast? Well, now your demand curve is up here. So I only need 4 packs. So up here, I could get stuck for $7 for a pack, 4 packs of diapers instead of 6. Yeah.
And this is all saying that this is when you're buying things online. If you're to go to the store, it'd be a different situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yes, but it's shifting.
Programs like sell their data to the same exact thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll get to the dynamic pricing. But this is in that asymmetric exchange where it's just you and a website, or you and DoorDash, like some of these delivery intermediaries. So now, the more they know about the consumer, the more they can manipulate the price. And because of the amount of data and the processing power, you can do it in real time. And so surveillance pricing begins to get down to these models on your willingness to pay. It has nothing to do with the cost of goods or the margin or anything else. It's all about your willingness to pay. And so you've got these really sophisticated, multidimensional pricing algorithms that get down to the individual price for each person. Now, this is when you're shopping online or on your mobile app or something like that, right? You're not exchanging information or walking in a store with anybody else. But it can get really dystopian. Right? I mean, you just sort of see where this thing goes. And this gets even worse, particularly where we are right now with the U.S. economy, is we generally have like really weak competition, particularly in retail. You've got a handful of really big retailers. Smaller retailers just have a tough time keeping up for a whole bunch of reasons. So the weaker the competition is, the more it gives that retailer leverage in terms of how they set price. Now, Walmart, biggest retailer in the country. So Walmart filed 2 patents. They got issued about a month ago. This one is dated January 13th. Has anybody in the room filed patents? Yeah? Couple? Okay. So from the time you had the concept to when your patent got issued, about how long was it? I know you've done a couple. Years, right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it takes a long time to go through the process. So this was just issued in 2026, which means Walmart's been working on this 5-6 years, something like that. I'm sure this has been in the labs for a long time. So what is this patent? So this is a patent for Walmart's e-commerce site, so online transactions, and it's about dynamically and automatically updating item prices on their e-com platform. And so what they're doing here is combining this concept of individualized price elasticity, right? How much do you want something? With Walmart's own demand forecast. So Walmart obviously has huge models about demand for goods. I mean, actually Walmart's got a reputation for knowing more about where the flu is around the world than any other retailer. And they drive their their inventory strategies as they track the flu as it kind of comes around the world. So focus on just this corner right here. You've got this machine learning section of the patent, of the kind of the processing system, and it's got a couple elements in it. It's got a demand forecast model, it's got a price elasticity model, pricing model, and then a bound model. So what do you think is in the price elasticity model? And this is for Walmart's e-com site. This is just you engaging with Walmart. Yeah, exactly. It's got a ton of data about you, and it's modeling what they think they can charge you.
And not just what you're willing to pay, but what you're able to pay.
And what you're able to pay. Yep. So probably some income information that's included in there. Credit scores might be in there too. I mean, all of this is when you sign up to use the Walmart app. So you log in and you've signed all of the user agreements. So all this data is wide open. There's no protections on any of this stuff. This is Walmart. Walmart's the largest private employer in the state of Idaho, about 9,000 employees. Their 27 stores do over $3 billion of revenue in the state. And they take out, they send back to Arkansas probably $200 million, $250 million a year in profit. And they're setting up this kind of model to exploit Idahoans even further. And oh, by the way, 1 in 8 Walmart employees don't get health care from Walmart. They get it from Idaho's Medicaid program. In addition to which, which we pay for as Idaho taxpayers. Yeah.
Do you know how many Walmart employees are on like SNAP or other benefits like that? I don't have the number, but I know it's non-zero.
It's significant. I can't remember the SNAP number, but the Walmart employees on Medicaid expansion, I think is about 1 in 8. Yeah. So this is what's coming. This is horrible, right? This is not the sort of economy that I want to live in. So that's surveillance pricing, and then this is also out of Walmart's patent filing, and I thought this was interesting. They as the price of the item gradually reduces according to the markdown pattern. So this little stair step is typically how Walmart models out the price of a product. What they think they can do with their patent and their new platform is basically be able to fix the price, and so they don't have to do this stair step. So the area here is the incremental profit that Walmart gets by understanding individually what your willingness to pay is. Now, dynamic pricing is you were talking about. Another Walmart patent that got filed recently. Walmart's been busy. So this is, I'm sure most everyone has seen these dynamic pricing labels in stores. Folks seen it? Hands up? Yeah. So no idea what is the underlying algorithm that adjusts the price or when they do it or the frequency. I mean, there's a nearly infinite number of variables that can go into this. But what you're doing in store now is trying to make that posted price more dynamic, more responsive to other events that are going on. And they're doing the same thing. They're applying a lot of third-party data. It's done broadly, but it's the same issue. And Walmart's corporate goal is to have these digital shelf labels rolled out by all stores by the end of 26. Yeah.
Is it dynamic enough that they could, like, if you and I were shopping at the same time, in the same hour, that you would pay a different price than I would?
I don't think so. But the capacity's there. They can roll it as quickly or as slowly as they want.
The way the tags work is that they broadcast it via the light system, so it's the whole store.
Yeah.
So they couldn't really make it just
Yeah.
But it could change between the time you grab the item. That's what I was wondering. You can check.
Yeah.
Could you explain what that?
Yeah, so it's just basic. It's like a little Kindle screen, and it's connected to the back end via maybe the lighting system. Yeah. So right in here, and it's just tied to the price of good. I've seen this at Best Buy too. They're using them kind of throughout the store. but it allows them, I mean, listen, so we're talking about water here. So on an exceptionally hot day, Boise in August, they could play some games with the price. And just, maybe it's just a couple cents, but Walmart only operates on a few points of margin. That's plenty for them. Yeah, in the back.
I mean, these were rolled out when I worked in Albertsons 15 years ago, and they were just simply because their excuse was just so we don't have employees have to walk through price check everyone. This is just simply a streamlined thing. So there is that potential to change prices, but 20 years, 15 years ago, it was just the same.
Yeah, it was just an easier way than just do the, but now that these are dynamically driven and there's a whole, machine learning architecture behind them, you could just do a lot more stuff. Yeah.
Do price gouging laws not protect us either? The same sort of thing, because the advantage.
Yeah.
Registered by the law.
Yeah. And then, there are bounds on price gouging. It's usually, really big steps as opposed to just, maybe another 2 points of margin on something like that.
Is this individual by individual, that the price changes?
No, that's harder to do in a store with lots of people walking by. But it can change from day to day. It can change, it can be different in the morning than in the afternoon. You've got all of this flexibility now, and you've got all the big data behind to power it.
People can use data too. I mean, buy hot weather goods when it's not hot.
You can. Yeah. All right, and then a conversation on dynamic pricing would not be complete without a conversation about it. Amazon. Amazon is just such a behemoth that they do a couple things. They have supply agreements where they demand that the supplier not offer a lower price to anybody else. That really is anti-competitive. That goes against a couple of the existing anti-competitive laws, but they seem to be getting away with it. But the big thing is that the algorithms that Amazon is using to watch what's happening on the web. If Amazon's algorithms are looking at the web, and if they say the same product at a lower price, they'll just match it. Now, what happens is that other retailers are doing the same thing. And so you begin to get this algorithmic optimization going on. So not only it may match on perhaps a price floor, you'll see these algorithms start raising prices together. And there's nothing to protect against that. It happens. And so typically what you see is Amazon is not the lowest price place to buy something, but it may be on a relative basis because of sort of all of the algorithms going across the web. And this is a big problem. The FTC has started some investigations around this. Unfortunately, under this administration, I think some of these investigations have kind of slowed down. But now you're getting very little price consistency when you're out on the web. And then another one here, which really combines them all. We're getting really dystopian. Is Instacart. So there was an article, I don't know if some folks saw about Instacart a couple months ago, but they were doing some kind of mystery shopping on Instacart and a group of people, and they were finding significantly different prices for the same good in the same store. And an example here is on a dozen eggs, where the price ranged the same dozen eggs from the same Safeway in Washington, D.C. One mystery shopper got it from $3.99, another was paying $4.79. And Instacart has purchased an AI company or a pricing algorithm company about 2 years ago, which was driving. Because what's interesting about Instacart is, they're a really profitable company. Total revenues are about $4 billion. They have like 75% gross margins, like a software company. They pay their employees or their contractors, basically sub-livable wages. But they're using this now. Again, we're in that asymmetric situation where I'm just using the Instacart app. I know what store I want to buy from, but Instacart's acting as that intermediary in between and trying to add a couple points of margin on their business on top of what they're paying or their shoppers paying the local grocery store. Now, how are we doing on time? Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do some mystery shopping. So grab your phone, and if you have the Target app on your phone, shop with the Target app. Some people have the same response I do. I loaded the Target app last night for just this exercise. Now, go to this Go Nanas chocolate chip banana bread muffin mix, vegan. $7.99 is the list price. I grabbed this morning off of the Target website, just using my desktop browser. But check it out. So let's see if anybody gets different prices for this. What's that? Same $7.99. Okay. $7.99. Okay. And how are you doing through the?
Not through the app, just through my browser.
On the web. Okay.
$7.59 through incognito.
Oh, $7.59 incognito. Okay, good. There's a good example. Any others?
Mine's $7.99 on my web browser.
Okay.
They know you're watching.
What's that?
They know that you're watching.
To be fair, we did the same website with the exact same request over.
Yeah. I went through this. I was checking some other goods, and I didn't find much of it. So I'll say, yeah. You got $8.39, and how are you going in?
Just regular browser, but I'm using a VPN.
And you're using a VPN. Okay.
From where?
Yeah.
It's based in like Georgia or something like that at the moment.
Okay.
I've seen like travel influencers say buy your airline tickets in incognito.
Yeah.
So they can adjust your prices
Yeah.
based on your data.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm not signed into the Target. Like, if we're in our browser, how would they have a user ID for us? How would they share information on us individually?
Well, it's. Some of the pricing decisions are given a lack of. So if they look at mine, they may say, hey, this person's price elasticity is higher. Their willingness to pay is higher. So the loyalty programs can sometimes work in reverse when you're logged in.
But to answer your question, so T-Mobile has what's called a super cookie. So everything you browse on, even incognito, T-Mobile will send a cookie along to the server, so they'll still know it's you.
Yeah, good point. So the comment there was, even if you're in incognito, there's still lots of identifying information about your phone, the T-Mobile super cookie. Let's go in the back and then each row and then, yeah.
So not really to the mystery shopper, but I do have a question. So what do you think the best approach for this is addressing at the consumer and business level the competitive practices or the individual data collection that's being done? You can attack this in both ways. I think there's one more important than the other.
Yeah, let's get to that right after this.
Oh, I was just going to say the incognito, it knows where I'm from. So
Yeah.
it's not really incognito.
Yeah.
And it probably went through our similar bio process.
Yeah. It's hard. There's not a lot of data privacy in this country, right? In Europe, the Europeans have done a much better job in terms of protecting consumer rights around data and the right not to be tracked. We haven't gotten there.
Just downloaded the app. It's $9.99.
$9.99 on the app.
At Target.
Wow. Okay. I wonder why that would be. They know something about you, Fred. Yeah. But you've got a fundamental policy question here about, is this okay? Right? In our society, in terms of balancing individual rights with a free market and a fair market, is this okay? Now, I know why they're all doing it, right? Because it's a great way to drive a few extra bucks of profit. But where do we draw the line and say, no, this is not okay? You can't you can exploit this information asymmetry now with our increasingly digital economy just to profit off of the back of us. So back to your question. So what do we do? And I'll wrap up on this. We really need to do your best to avoid these situations, these asymmetric commercial situations here. Mobile apps, honestly, are the worst. What I try, I'm campaigning, so I'm driving around the state a lot. I try and focus on just the little restaurants when I'm driving around the state. But every once in a while, I'll do a test with the McDonald's app, and I'll order something, when I'm on the road, and then go into the local McDonald's and try and see if I can pair up what the mobile app gave me as a price with what's available on the menu in the restaurant. And you do find instances where they don't line up, or you get different pricing, or there are different scenarios on the mobile app than what's available in the restaurant. Reducing your data footprint, things like loyalty programs. When you check out at the grocery store, I mean those. They may give you some discount somewhere down the line, but listen, you're the product in that. You're the ones getting monetized, not the loyalty program. So just saying no to all of those, and doing your best not to open the door to feed more of your data into the pricing algorithms. Anonymizing shopping with a VPN, sometimes that works. I tried it doing some flights, and it didn't work for me. And then you can just make a decision not to shop where these digital shelf labels are being used. Now, institutional, and looking at it from a policy standpoint, we've got to pass real federal data privacy laws. It's time. I mean, it's ridiculous that we don't have it. Unfortunately, I think it's a function of big tech and big retail's control over Congress, and we've got to break that control. There's a lot that could be done at the state level. So, mine, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get mine all the way through the legislature last session. But you can there's a couple states that have algorithmic price fixing bans. And this one in Colorado is a ban on surveillance pricing. It's a really interesting bill. It actually just got through the Colorado House last night. And that's the first one to go after surveillance pricing. And there's some interesting stuff there. The cool thing about states is states have not only their own antitrust and consumer protection laws, but they can also use federal antitrust and consumer protection laws. So an aggressive AG has a couple of things in his toolkit to go after to be able to stop some of these bad practices. We've got a lot of antitrust laws on the books that just aren't being enforced right now. Like Robinson-Patman is one that sort of keeps the playing field level between big retailers and smaller retailers. We need to start exercising RPA again. The FTC is just chronically short of resources. They need to be staffed up so they can do the research and go after some of this stuff. And then we just, I think these last two things here, we really need to modernize our antitrust and our consumer protection laws, and just be thoughtful in terms of how we restrict this asymmetric exploitation that's going on in the economy. That's a tough effort, but I think that's got to be done at the federal level, and then that will that can trickle down to the states, and the states can implement it too. But I think you can stop most of the bad practices at the federal level. But this is the sort of stuff and why I'm running for the Senate. I think that's it. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. That's it. I saw one hand in the back.
Yeah, I was just curious because I was writing my notes on my Notes app. What is the data protection and data usage Notes app?
That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah.
So what does it mean?
So like when you go at hey, you use this service, you check the box, you consent to whatever, that tells you what they collect, how they use it, when they pull it, and each platform, software, company all have different ones.
No, Apple talks yeah, exactly. I mean, Apple talks a good show on it, but I mean, you'd have to get down and take a look. Yeah.
I guess maybe two thoughts. One, there's this sort of big owner problem where if Walmart owns 30% of the market or whatever, and you agree to terms of service, you kind of have to either agree to all of it or none of it.
I don't.
And there's no selective terms of service or any ability to opt out of
Yeah.
anything along the way.
Yeah.
Is that on your radar?
It's a really good point. It needs to be, because those those T's and C's now are just out of control. And it's just impossible for, even if you are an attorney and you can interpret all that stuff, it's still a binary decision.
But then you just not have a phone.
Yeah.
Because you need to buy from Samsung, right? It's like, there's
Yeah.
limited choices, and so then you can't really opt out.
Yeah.
Of one. On the loyalty program, don't forget that credit card data sells them too. So if you use your MasterCard at Kroger, they still can link it to you.
Yeah, good point.
What is your thought on, so there's a lot of protect the children from porn laws, which require real IDs,
Mm-hmm.
which then require you to use your real ID when you go to a website. Make sense?
Yeah.
How does that play into this?
So the third point is about real ID and sort of the application of your ID when you're shopping online, right?
Like Discord wants to have you upload your driver's license.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the chat, right? And so like now they really know who I am.
yeah.
Because of these other laws.
Not that.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean that cuts both ways. I don't know what the right answer is on that. That's a much bigger issue. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Who is like really advocating for the consumer and like on a political level, you know, like not the lobbyists, not the corporations.
Nobody.
Like who?
You're, us,
Somebody
those of
like
us
you.
voting.
Yeah.
Why I'm helping with your,
Yeah.
promoting your campaign. But, yeah, like who is?
I mean, and honestly, this is why I'm running as an independent, because I think unfortunately both parties are captured in Congress. You can't tell the difference between the corporatist Dems and the corporatist Republicans, unfortunately. And there's just too damn much money in elections, and so that creates the quid pro quo. That is why we haven't had any data laws or data protection laws and privacy laws. I mean, and those are the things that we've got to break. We got to rejuvenate Congress, and we've got to get it going again. Yeah.
There was a nonprofit called the Electronic Freedom Foundation.
Yeah.
EFF.
Yeah.
They do a lot of policy stuff.
Yeah, EFF does a really good job. Yeah.
So when you started off, you gave some definitions of algorithms and AI and machine learning. And I do think one of the problems in government is the octogenarian's understanding of technology.
Yeah.
I know you're, based on your resume, you have some technology background. Do you have the broader understanding and working in AI to the point that you understand it? Or I'm asking the question kind of in a way of, can you define it back for those of us that live in that world to show that you get it, which is why Congress should.
Yeah. And we just got the 0-minute warning, so which means we're done. But it's a good question. I mean, I don't consider myself to have deep expertise on, say, AI. I mean, my background is more in wireless and networking and all of that. I'm learning, and learning the fundamentals. But that is what we need in Congress. Yeah, we need people that really understand this stuff. So apologies. I'll hang out there if you guys have some questions. But thanks very much. Appreciate it.